Hello, my name is Matthew Taylor, and welcome to our Bush Broadcast Deep Dive webinar, where we chat with some of our Bush Heritage team to explore a particular topic. And today we're going to be looking at volunteering. So first up, I'm joining you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and I extend that respect to any Indigenous Australians online with us today. Please join me in celebrating and recognising the incredible privilege it is to be standing on these beautiful lands that have been stewarded by First Nations peoples for tens of thousands of years. Now, as always, as we go through the conversations today, please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom right of your screen to say good day, tell us where you're calling in from, and please use this to post any questions you may have for our speakers today. And we'll be getting to a Q&A at the end where we'll endeavour to cover all the questions you have. Now, you may know that next week is National Volunteer Week, and that's why we decided it was very timely to talk today about volunteering. Also, this year is the UN International Year of Volunteers for Sustainable Development. So how perfect for timing. This year is really providing the opportunity to recognise volunteer contributions, highlight how volunteerism connects people and drives the local solutions and creates some really lasting impact. And that's what we're going to explore today. So, really good time to come together and celebrate Bush Heritage volunteers and the significant impact and passion they bring to our conservation efforts. We'll have a few chats with some of our wonderful volunteers shortly, but to kick off, I'd like to introduce you to the wonderful lady on the screen here, who is Katie Ronald, our National Volunteer Programme Coordinator. Welcome, Katie. How are you doing and where are you calling in from today?
Hi, thanks, Matthew. Kaya, hello, everyone. I am joining from Wajak Noongar Budja in Boorloo, or Perth.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Katie, I'd love to know, we often ask this question, how did you get to Bush Heritage? What was the journey and how did you end up working with our volunteers, which you do so capably?
Thanks, Matthew. I've always had a really strong connection with nature. I grew up in Gippsland in Victoria, spent a lot of time out in the wetlands and camping up in the highlands as well. But after moving to Perth, it was actually two high school biology teachers who really sparked my interest in conservation and led me to study environmental management. When I started working in that field, though, I sort of fell into volunteer management, which is not an uncommon story for a lot of volunteer managers. But I've quickly realised how much I loved working in that space. And I've spent the last 15 years working in that sector for environmental not-for-profits. I've always really loved connecting people to something meaningful, finding that right fit between someone's skills and passion, and really seeing the difference that they can make. But what I love about our program at Bush is our volunteers are so deeply aligned with our mission and they genuinely care about the same challenges that we face, but they also celebrate the wins alongside us as well. And that shared purpose is pretty special and it makes working here pretty rewarding.
And it's really quite important, isn't it, to not-for-profits having really strong volunteers. Tell us a bit about why that's so integral to have this additional group of people on top of, staff.
Absolutely. So volunteers are absolutely central to what we do. We simply couldn't achieve our 2030 goals without them. They bring an incredible combination of passion, skills, and commitment. And they're here because they deeply care about protecting nature and want to contribute to something meaningful. But it's not just about the work that they do on the ground. As a philanthropic organisation, our community is everything. And our volunteers are some of our most powerful advocates. They share their experiences, they bring others along, and they really help to build a broader movement around conservation. So their impact goes well beyond the hours that they contribute. They really help to amplify why our work matters.
I know I'm always impressed when I've been out volunteering on Bush Heritage Reserves. It's some of the most powerful experiences I've had is actually working alongside people who are doing this, out of the goodness of their heart and teaching me things, which is fantastic. So tell us a bit about the volunteering program at Bush. How many do we have out there supporting our conservation work? And perhaps a bit about the roles and tasks that are involved, because I know it's almost anything, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. We've got a huge and diverse volunteer program. We've got around 2,000 registered volunteers and about 550 of them head out on a placement each year. And we engage volunteers on around 30 of our reserves, as well as from home and from our offices. So there's lots of different ways for them to get involved. The uniqueness or the difference in our program is that our opportunities are mostly what we call episodic. So there might be a couple of days on a reserve that's closer to a regional town, or up to a couple of weeks or longer on one of our more remote locations. And each one of those individual opportunities has its own application process, its own recruitment process. On the ground, volunteers support a really wide range of conservation activities, things like weed control, planting, flora and fauna monitoring, and fence removal. Our properties that have homestead precincts look for volunteers to assist with infrastructure maintenance and repairs. And the reserves where our staff live or where we require a presence, we've got caretaking opportunities available for our experienced volunteers. And although they're not as frequent, our home and our office-based opportunities are in areas like data entry and administration, perfect example there of Eva, one of our long-term home-based volunteers, ecological data analysis and research, strategy and policy work, and of course our board and our subcommittees are all volunteers as well.
Fantastic. So in terms of how and when these opportunities come up, is there a particular rhythm to the sort of volunteering season? Obviously, field work in conservation terms has very definite seasons because you have to take into account fire hazards and wet seasons. How is it for volunteering?
Yeah, it's very, very regionally different. So although we've got volunteering on a lot of the different reserves, the frequency of opportunities varies quite a bit depending on the location. And like you mentioned, those conditions as well. So generally, our field season, I want to put a caveat on generally, our field season is roughly from around March through to October. But because of that seasonality, there are those differences within the regions. So for example, some of our South Australian and Queensland reserves are mostly active in the cooler months. You can see a photo there of Scottsdale, which I was just about to mention, near Canberra, where we have opportunities almost all year round. And that was a volunteer event where they got a bit of snow out there. But I also think it's important to be quite transparent with our program that we are oversubscribed in some areas. So our opportunities can be competitive to apply for, but it just really speaks to how passionate people are about being part of this work.
But you mentioned the application process. That's one of the things that most impressed me when, even though I work for Bush Heritage, when I applied to be a volunteer as well, because God damn it, I can't help myself. I just want to go out at weekends and do more. I was really impressed with how careful that process is and how much you look after people. So I think it's important to frame that our program is generally very well received, isn't it? Because there's a bit of matchmaking. You talk to people individually, don't you, to find out where their skills will work best.
Absolutely. And the information that we provide about each of our placements, we try and make as detailed as possible so that volunteers have got a really realistic expectation of the physical requirements of the role, the remoteness of it, the conditions that are out on those reserves as well. But yes, we've got 4 amazing volunteer coordinators around the country who manage all of our on-ground placements, and they do an incredible amount of hard work to make that match work really, really well for the volunteer, but also for Bush Heritage.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for giving us that context to the wider program. Now, I think it's time to bring some of our wonderful volunteers on screen who've been hanging around waiting to tell us their stories. As they're brought on by our wonderful producer, Megan, we've got a brief video which you're going to see on our social media next week as part of our contribution to National Volunteer Week.
We're trying to make what we've loved about being outdoors still available for our kids and our grandkids. That's very important to us.
I just like the Australian bush and the Australian environment. I think it's very fragile. I think we need to look after it.
I think it's very important to volunteer in the environmental space because it allows for non-for-profit organisations to keep running and also do a lot of really important citizen science.
It's a really great way to get to know people, like-minded people, to meet people from different age groups who maybe you wouldn't meet in everyday life.
There we go, a nice little intro from some of our volunteers. Now, on screen, you will see 3 of our treasured volunteers. Cecile, hello there, and Margot and Gary, welcome to you too.
Hello, Matthew.
Thank you.
Let's go through first of all. Where are you all calling in from? Cecile, start with you. Which part of the country are you in right now?
Good afternoon, Matthew. Hi, everyone. I'm calling from Badjala country, Fraser Coast, Queensland. I'm at home in Maryborough.
Excellent. And Margot and Gary, I believe you're actually out volunteering on a program right now for a friend, aren't you?
Yes, we're doing some fire damage. So we're in Toongaroong country, which is in the Strathbogie Ranges in Victoria.
How very nice. So slightly cooler climate for you at the moment.
Yeah, slightly cooler. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Bush Heritage is very fortunate in having so many committed and skilled volunteers like you guys who come from all walks of life, different ages and so many different backgrounds. So let's explore that a bit. Can we ask you, Cecile, first of all, what drew you to volunteering for Bush Heritage? I know you're a very qualified lady, could do so many things in the world. Why are you volunteering for us?
Well, my happy place is in nature with the birds. So I thought it would be a win-win situation if I could go on reserve and do the bird surveys for Bush Heritage. So that's my reason for being out there.
Excellent. And you've done a fair bit of that, haven't you? Can you give us a sense of how widely you've travelled to do that?
Yes. Well, last year I went to Yorka Reserve in North Queensland, and I'm just coming back from Edgbaston, where I spent 2 weeks doing the bird surveys there. I was hoping that there would be lots of birds because of the amount of rain that they've just had. And, there's always water available because of the springs, but because there's now water available everywhere in Queensland, the birds had actually dispersed. So having said that, there were still some very good birds out there.
Excellent. Well, like you, I've done bird surveys at Edgbaston, and it was a great joy. And it was drier conditions when I was there, so it was fortunate. And I'm sure Dean, our freshwater ecologist, roped you in to do some reptile work as well, didn't he, with the pitfall traps?
That's right. So once we've done the 20-minute bird surveys, I could join the pitfall trapping team and get all the catch and, heaps of reptiles, planigales.
That's those little tiny flattened things that are about a 50-cent piece size marsupial, aren't they?
Smallest mammals, indeed.
And they live in the cracks in the clay, don't they?
Yeah, and sometimes also in the cracks between your legs. They crawl up your shirt. It happened once when I dropped one, but we managed to catch it again, fortunately.
Well, this is an aside and wasn't forming part of our chat today, but I have to tell the story of Dean, who, as I mentioned, is our freshwater ecologist, but also loves identifying lizards. And he has a particular method for avoiding the trauma of a dropped reptile or a dropped marsupial. He gets one of those great big scalloped shell dishes that are used as dog baths or sand pits for kids. And he puts it in the shed and he sits in the middle of it, cross-legged, and he identifies all his reptiles. And if he drops one, it just drops on the ground and he can catch it again and scoop it up, which is, I thought, an excellent system for ecologists to avoid the problem of disappearing. Okay, well, let's turn to you, Margot and Gary. I know you have a very busy calendar of volunteering, and you do this for numerous organisations, which I think makes you true superheroes. Can you give us a sense of some of the roles and projects you've worked on for Bush Heritage?
Yeah, look, we've been lucky to do a range of them. We've worked with redfin, blue-eyed redfin in Queensland. We've done work with the nail-tailed wallabies in Queensland as well. We've done lots of tree planting. We've done lots of erosion control. On the screen now, we've just been up to Bunyal to paint the outside of the house that was there. That was the condition that we started with. And then the next slide that comes up, that's the end result. Once we'd done the sanding back, we'd filled holes, and then we put 2 coats of paint on. So hopefully that'll last for a lot longer. We've also done wheel cactus eradication. So we've stabbed them, we've drilled them. And the great result is that you do see them when you come back in 12 months' time that they're dead on the ground.
Ooh, is that a before and after picture we've got behind us there of once you've stabbed them?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we've done some caretaking, various roles. We've done erosion control. we're not flora and fauna people as such, but we just like helping out nature in lots of other ways. So yeah, we've been lucky enough to Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and Western Australia. So we're lucky.
And Gary, can I ask you what's your favourite type of job? Have you got a favourite?
Look, I probably haven't got a favourite. I think they're all enjoyable. We do love working with other volunteers. We learn heaps from them. Obviously, people like Dean we've worked with, so we learn from those people, and the reserve managers as well. So we learn a lot from them. So it's just being out in nature, I think, seeing how nature is working and what Bush Heritage are trying to do to restore that balance. And if we can make some just small contribution towards that, we come away feeling really positive and happy. Mm.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to know whether each of you has any particular favourite volunteering experiences or funny stories. Cecile's mentioned dropping planigales, or any other highlights. Would you like to share any other insights or experiences you've had that have entertained you or caused great joy? Cecile, anything else?
Well, it's nature and the animals that attract me to those reserves. It's the human factor that's one of the highlights. Working with other volunteers who share common interests, we don't have to go through the small talk to get to know each other. We get really strong connections. And I see you've got on the screen there the nest of a stick nest rat, and that was at Evelyn Downs Reserve in South Australia. I was just amazed to be able to find such nests there, over 100 years old, and they're still there. They're still there. We build houses nowadays that fall apart within 2 or 3 decades, and we have stick nest there in nature that are still standing. To me, it was really an outstanding sighting, and yes, that was the highlight of 2025.
Nature's always got something to inspire you, hasn't it? What about you, Margot?
Indeed.
Have you got any favourite anecdotes from your travels?
Yeah, certainly working with the nail-tailed wallabies, it was great just firstly seeing them and seeing the breeding program. But I think what I really enjoyed was actually when we were able to release them back into the wild. That was just fantastic, because you've seen the program, you've trapped them, done the health check, and then there's a certain number that you can release back into the wild, and you go, well, this breeding program is working. It's an endangered species, and it's just great to see them getting back out there. So for me, that was really good. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
And Gary, you've got anything any highlights?
Heaps of them. But probably just a little story that came up just very recently. We were at Buckra caretaking, and we had some volunteers come up to do 2 days on the wheel cactus eradication program. And anyway, after the second day, and we'd been working with them, and we had a terrific group with us, and they were really good workers. And there was a young lady just finished university, wants to get into environmental sort of programs, workplace. And anyway, Margot and I were both sort of just going around thanking the individuals, and I got to this young lady, and I
think we may have lost.
Thanks very much for all your work you've done. And she just looked at me and she just said, I feel a bit sad about going back to Melbourne. And I went, wow. If there's no other reaction to that, I just thought that was fantastic. I feel a bit sad about going back to Melbourne. And I went, wow, we've converted somebody else. Yeah.
And that was wheel cactus stabbing. That's impressive.
Wheel cactus stabbing, correct. And we did hundreds of them. Yes.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, just before we move on to and getting back to Katie, what have you got planned for your next volunteering gigs? Have you got things on the horizon that are going to entertain you, Cecile?
Yeah, I'm just about to go to Edgbaston Reserve. So I came back last Friday from Edgbaston, and we're going to Efabuka on Monday. So
out in the desert, on the sand dune country.
That's right, Western Queensland there, past Bedourie and Bulliaway, to do the Aryan grassland surveys and the woodland bird surveys. So there's 5 weeks out there. And then in August, we're going back to Pulan Reserve. In September to Nari. And in October, back to Edgbaston, and after that, we've got to wait until next year because it gets too hot to do anything on reserve. Just like you were speaking about earlier, the calendar. So the fun
Yes.
stops until March.
Well, I have to say, I think I mentioned it to you when we were planning this webinar, but Cecile, as a volunteer, you've got the most attractive job in the world. I wish somebody could be, I wish I could do that as well as this job. So it sounds gorgeous.
I love it.
Margot and Gary, what about you? Have you got things lined up after you finished with your friend there?
We have. We're grey nomads, so we're heading off in the caravan in June. We're heading to South
Beautiful.
Australia, and we're just going to go up to Farina, where they're restoring the town up there. We'll probably, hopefully, do some volunteering there, but it's mainly a holiday. But we have got lined up caretaking at the Roundhouse in Victoria in November.
Excellent. That's our property just northwest of Melbourne, isn't it? That
correct. Yes, out from Broadford.
Probably northeast. Yeah, northeast.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, is it?
Northeast.
Northeast. Yeah, you're absolutely
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we'll be there for the month of November, which is, be great.
Excellent. It's a beautiful property, that one. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for sharing your stories with us. I'm going to head back to Katie now because, Katie, I'd love to ask you how, and for the benefit of our listeners, who a lot of whom I think are already volunteers, but for those who aren't, how do people join the volunteering program?
Yeah, so there's best place to start is on our website. So under the how you can help section, there is some great information about the program and what's available in each region. So we talk a little bit about the frequency of different opportunities in each region in there as well. And from there, you can submit an expression of interest, and one of our team will be in touch to talk about what you're looking for in your volunteering and whether it aligns with what we are able to offer as well. Which does lead me into that we don't accept all applications, unfortunately, because we really want to make sure that it's the right fit for both the volunteer and for Bush Heritage. But where we can, we'll often point people towards other opportunities with other organisations if we're not quite the right fit.
Fantastic. And in terms of how you sort of fill those placements, the advertising, once you've signed up, you put out regular communications listing the opportunities, don't you? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so once you're a registered volunteer, opportunities are shared via email, and then each placement comes with details about the location, the timing, the requirements, what's involved, and then volunteers can apply for the ones that suit their skills and experience. And then our coordinators work really closely with our reserve staff to match the right people to the right role. Just trying to, again, get that best fit and best experience for everyone.
Fantastic. And is training provided where appropriate for the roles that people are being asked to do?
Yeah, so it depends a bit on the role. So for some of our on-ground activities, things like planting or manual weed removal, a little bit of training is provided. But for most of our specialised roles, we're usually looking for volunteers who already bring those skills along with them. But that's all outlined in the each role that we advertise. It will go through the prerequisites that are required. So what skills we already need volunteers to have. And then we'll also outline what training or what support we then provide as well.
Excellent. Well, I've been through that process at Scottsdale for tree planting because I went along as a gardener thinking I probably know how to plant a tree. And it's like, no, Phil Palmer at Scottsdale has planted thousands of trees in his time. And he's developed a very specific method which works really well and gets great survival rates. So that training is very valuable and something I could take home for, back to my own garden to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if you're planting in different locations, like June planting is completely different to, like what they're doing at Scottsdale. So it's, very interesting to see the different methods and exactly you can then take back to your own gardens.
Yes, indeed. Well, one of the things if we had time, I was going to ask, and I think this is something of general interest, is a little bit more about the species you encounter when you are doing that fauna trapping or bird surveys. Because Cecile, I know you do a lot of that, and perhaps you can share a little bit more about the entertaining characters you come across.
Well, there were still heaps of broadgulls and Australian bustards at Edgbaston.
Wow.
Lots of bunny eaters, weebills, and this round of surveys, I found 3 groups of fairy wrens of different species, redback, white-winged, and purple-backed, that were feeding a juvenile Horsfield bronze cuckoo. 3 different groups, so there's going to be lots of cuckoos on reserve.
Wow. So
Yeah,
what,
interesting to hear that
a
called.
single young cuckoo is being fed by 3 different species,
On 3 different
3 different locations.
locations. Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Poor old fairy wrens, eh?
that's right. That's right. And also, when we were off spotlighting on surveys at night on our way, we found a pair of books feeding on the track. And that was a close encounter. We got to see them for 2 or 3 minutes. It was really magic.
It is amazing how nighttime birds will often just sit still on the ground, won't they? Going,
Indeed.
what are those bright lights staring at me
That's
for?
right. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I hope we're going to get Margot and Gary back in a minute. They've just dropped off. They may have had some connection problems. So I think that probably is beginning to wrap up. And I think if there's any more questions from people, I see there's some lovely comments coming through in the chat, acknowledging just how wonderful it is that, and making the point, Heather has said, look, wonderful volunteers, you're the people who make the world go round. Thank you all. So I think that's a lovely tribute to the work that is actually underway. Last thing, perhaps before we wrap up then, if there aren't any other questions coming through, are there any particular skills, Katie, that we're finding are in short supply or that you'd love to put a shout out to?
It varies season to season, and it varies regionally as well. So in more of our remote areas where we've got infrastructure, so usually those reserves where our staff live, where we've got those homestead precincts, we're looking for people with handy people skills, repair skills. It's really, really difficult to get people out into those areas with those skills. So people that have been tradespeople in their professional careers or still are. Some of our surveying skills as well. So as you would have seen with Cecile, she's got so many of the bird surveys and fauna surveys coming up, because we do sometimes struggle to get volunteers that have got really specific bird survey knowledge. So they need to be able to identify birds by sight and by call, and the birds that are in that region as well. So we do work with BirdLife as well to share those opportunities, because they'll obviously have those volunteers too. But yeah, it's very variable. It's really hard to answer that question, but and because of the dispersity around the country as well. So I absolutely recommend, if people just want to find out more specifically about what their skills and interests are and whether we can match that, reach out through the website and we'll have a chat about, the areas that people are looking to volunteer, and then what we have got available, what comes up generally in that area, and whether we've got that alignment or not. But yeah, we can have that chat and see whether it aligns.
Excellent. One question has come through. Cecile, you mentioned the sticknet rat nest and that it had been there for 100 years. The question is, was there a stick-nest rat itself present? And I suspect that's a bit of a sad tale, but please, can you give us a bit more of that story?
No, I should have said that. I should have said that species went extinct 100 years ago. So that's why it is just incredible to still have that nest there unattended. Obviously, because the species has gone extinct. There are a few programs that are reintroducing this species, but they're very hard to work with and to reintroduce. So perhaps they will be back in the wild.
And that's extinct locally, not entirely.
Entirely, they just parked on some islands of the Australian coast. Yeah, very hard to reintroduce. A few projects have tried and failed, unfortunately.
Yes, but the evidence is still there. And it's remarkable how a tiny little rat can actually carry those sticks and stones around, isn't it, to build that mound?
Amazing. Amazing.
Well, we're getting towards the end of the webinar. I'd just like to say a personal thank you to all the volunteers I've met and encountered in my travels around the Bush Heritage Reserve. And thank you, Cecile. Thank you, Margot. For chatting with us today and continuing your volunteering by talking to us. Very much look forward to seeing you out on reserve at some point. And if we haven't got any more questions, then I think I'd just like to put a final reminder in that all our Bush Broadcast webinars are available on the website, so you can access them at any time. And of course, feel free to share those with friends, family, or colleagues, anybody who has a passion for nature, because you never know what's going to be the final little thing that tips them over into going, you know what, I think I'm going to find out about this organization. Let's go and volunteer. I think a lot of people test us out by volunteering and find out whether they're looked after. And it's something I'm very proud to be part of an organization that frequently gets people saying, you know what, your volunteer program is the best I've been involved in. And I think that's a testament to the work that Katie and her team do in terms of looking after people. So thank you, Gary, Cecile, Margot. Thank you, Katie, as well, for looking after all these wonderful people. A last shout out to all the volunteers who I know some of them are listening on to the webinar and have done some volunteering themselves. I think for me personally, it's been mentioned before, but the biggest joy is you go out and you do something and you do good for conservation, but at the same time, you meet incredibly clever people, cleverly smart people and cleverly real chatty people. And that joy of connecting with other human beings who share that passion. As you say, you don't need icebreakers. You don't need, to talk about religion or politics or, the AFL. You're just straight in. When was the last stick nest rat you might have you found? What was the last marsupial you dropped? It's just chat. So that's the wonderful part about it.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. Our next webinar is going to be coming to you from Charles Darwin Reserve in WA at the northern end of the wheat belt. It's an incredible spot, and it's a place that is very much our focus at the moment. If you've been getting our social media or some of our emails, you'll know that we're in the middle of an appeal campaign because we'd love to purchase the adjacent property, Wanara. It's an incredibly important piece of the jigsaw, and we'll talk all about that at the next webinar. So please look out for that. And to whet your appetite for that, our closing video today is a sneak peek from the comms team. Thanks finally again, everybody, for joining us today. I'll see you out on reserve. Goodbye.
We have this amazing opportunity to purchase Wanara and conserve this amazing landscape even further. It contains everything sort of from like sweeping salt lake complexes to magnificent woodlands to rugged granite outcrops and expanses of the wildflowers that the Midwest is famous for.
The opportunity to buy Wanara is a very exciting prospect. Purchasing Wanara would increase the area that we're making an impact on here with Charles Darwin Reserve by another 107,000 hectares. It's in a very ideal location where it's basically the puzzle piece that's missing between a bunch of other nature reserves in the region. Altogether, if this is protected as well, it would lead to 1 million hectares of protected country.
Please come on this journey with us, support us and watch this landscape blossom.